Well, hi everybody, Brian Goulet here of GouletPens.com, and it's episode number 224 of Goulet Q&A, my weekly question and answer session. I feel like it's going to be a good one today. I really do. We got a ton of questions, like 80 plus questions, which is on the higher end for Q&A. I don't know why. I guess everybody had a long weekend in the US and just had more time to sit around and think about random pen questions. But in this episode, I'm going to talk about making the leap into next level pens, how and why special editions happen, and some of my daily carries right now, among other things. But before I get into all the questions, just a little update on kind of what's been going on with me. I know I went super long in the intro last week, coming off the San Francisco show. I'm going to try to keep it a little tighter this week. But my kids started school this week. I know we're kind of on the later end, I guess. It's not super common for everybody to start school after Labor Day. Maybe not like it used to. I feel like I know more people that are starting school earlier. Anyway, so my kids started school. My son is in 3rd grade. My daughter's in 1st grade. And man, they still love school. They get excited. Their teachers seem really good. They have, friends that they know in their classes, and they actually had their. So I'm recording this on Wednesday. So I'm going off of the first day of school they had on Tuesday, and they just had a blast. It was awesome. So kids are loving school. That makes life a little easier for us as parents, at least so far. I know it's only going to get harder as they get along, but something interesting that happened this week, we actually kind of broke our our blog. So as it turns out, our blog server was undersized for the amount of traffic that we were sending to it. So we've been having issues kind of here and there, but then when we sent newsletters intentionally pointing folks to the blog, it really it kind of completely broke it this week. So the good thing that came out of that though was that we recognized that was happened, troubleshot it, and upgraded our server. So now the blog should be a little more reliable than it has been. So that was kind of fun. We also had some new state tax law things going into effect. Don't know if you knew this, but for online retailers, there are now some new state tax law implications in place in certain states, only for retailers at certain thresholds and volumes and stuff like that. It's really confusing. It is not super clear, and states are coming out with legislation kind of constantly regarding this. All of this is stemming from a Supreme Court ruling that states can collect state tax based on economic nexus, not just a physical nexus of a presence in the state. So the floodgates have kind of opened for all kinds of state tax collection liability for online retailers. And so states are kind of coming out with all kinds of various things right now. So we are doing our best to keep track of it all, and we did a blog post to kind of wrangle it all up. There's some states that are in effect now. There's others that are going to be in effect in October, and others at the beginning of the year, and there's going to be kind of rolling changes. So be on the lookout for that. It's not just going to affect Goulet Pens, but it's going to affect a lot of online places that you shop. So you may already be feeling or seeing some of that, but we're going to try to do our best to communicate that stuff as it happens. But boy, is it consuming in terms of Rachel's time, especially. She's helping sort a lot of that stuff out. We're working with a special state and local tax CPA on this stuff, and it's confusing. It really is, especially because it's not centralized and all completely figured out and well communicated as to what's going on, but we're doing our best to figure it out. Part of our value of Be Honest is to always pay our taxes and make sure that we're communicating stuff well. Some new product stuff that we have going on, not a whole ton. We've been a little slower right now in terms of the new product releases and stuff like that, but we do have the Colorverse Wisdom of Trees. So that's kind of the latest line of their inks. It's only 6 total inks, 3 different sets. So there's a Methuselah Tree and Grove. And that's, the Wisdom of Trees set is 2 different colors for each set. So the bigger bottle has a coppery color, and the smaller one is a dark brown, and the Methuselah one. Ginkgo Tree and Golden Leaves. The Ginkgo Tree is a burnt orange, and the yellow is the Golden Leaves. And then Coast Redwood and Redwood Forest. So there's a maroon and a green. So nice little sets there. If you're a fan of the Colorverse and what that theming all is, their theming is on point. So that's the latest one. Not a space theme, but this is like an Earth themed one. So kind of cool, grounding themselves a little bit. And then the Pilot Custom Urushi and Vermilion. So this is something that we haven't had before. And we just got some in last week, so check that out if you're into it. some of the biggest pens that we have. They're really cool looking though, and Urushi is just fun. Some stuff that we're gonna have coming soon. I don't have like firm dates on a lot of this stuff. Just found out about some of these things. So looking forward to hearing about the Pilot 100th Anniversary Edition stuff soonish. September, I've got things on my radar. We might be finding out about some things and be able to talk about it more publicly. We might start to see some stuff in October, but we're getting to the point where as soon as it was like, oh, fall's coming, I'm gonna have that on my radar. So be on the lookout for that. The Vanishing Point limited edition Crossed Lines may be coming soon in the next week or two. The Platinum Procyon is something, it's a new pen from Platinum on like the $70-ish range, so that's kind of interesting. So I don't have any in my hands yet, but I've seen them in person and they're pretty cool. So we'll have those at some point. And then Monteverde DC Super Show Blue, I think we've actually already got that. So that is here. And then there's some other kind of various things, but that's what I've got on my radar right now. So there's some stuff coming, but there's some really big exciting stuff. We got some cool stuff cooking in the works in the future, but that's kind of what's happening immediately. Let's get to the questions this week, shall we? I got 7 solid questions for you. Couple really meaty ones that I'm gonna be able to sink my teeth into. So I think it's gonna be good. All right, starting out with pen and writing question. This is from geekingituptwentyfourseven on Instagram. When is it time to take the leap from a relatively cheap pen to a more so expensive one, like 50 to 150? Well, when is that right time to take a leap? That's a great question. I'd say when you feel ready. You know, for a long time when I first started out in fountain pens, I only had pens that were in like the $20 to $30 range, and I was pretty happy with that for some time. So I didn't really feel like I was missing out on the $150 plus pens. And you definitely don't have to spend that much to really enjoy your fountain pen experience. There's a lot of good pens in the lower price range. You know, even some of the recent ones that come out, the TWSBI Go is pretty awesome, Eco and stuff like that. You know, the Metropolitan, the Safari, there's a lot of great pens in kind of that lower price range that you can enjoy really for your entire fountain pen experience. You don't have to get up to that higher price range to have a great experience. You know, you can spend that much money on a pen and still not really love it if it's not the right pen for you, or, you know, if you maybe just thought you should get it but weren't really understanding why, maybe you won't see the value in it. So it's not like just spending more money and throwing at it will make it feel worth it to you. But if you're really on the fence and you start to feel the value and you really feel that tug towards it because you see some benefits to it, either materials or, you know, the nibs or whatever, then the best thing is to try to get one in your hands, if at all possible. You know, because you can look at pictures online, you can take my advice, and sometimes that's enough to make the leap, and hopefully I try to do as much as I can. Our team, we try to do as much as we can here, being that we're online only, to portray what value there might be in a more expensive pen, especially because there is a bit of a gamble buying expensive stuff online, and we recognize that. But still, trying to get something tactile like this in your hands can really that can seal the deal for you. So if you have a local pen meetup, or maybe you want to start one, or have some pen friends, or, you know, sometimes you can go on Reddit, or you can go on Fountain Pen Network, or you can go on, you know, Pen Addict Slack or Goulet Nation or something like that. You can say, hey, I'm in the local whatever Richmond, Virginia area. That's where we are. And I would love to get together and talk some pens. Is there a meetup happening? Does anybody who love pens want to grab coffee sometime? We can try each other's pens. You know, that can be really kind of cool. So there's that. You can swap or trade online if you have a pen that somebody else maybe is interested in trying, and you're just trying theirs. You can like swap it and then swap it back. You know, pen shows, if you happen to be near any, you know, there's only like, you know, 12 or 13 that happen in a year, and it may be hundreds of miles away from you at the closest. So that may or may not be as practical, but that's like dropping into the deep end. That's like dropping in the middle of the ocean of the pen world. And then obviously just kind of doing a lot of research and figuring out what it is that might help you take that leap. You may just hear so many people talking about certain pens like the Lamy 2000 or the Pilot Falcon or the Platinum 3776 or the Vanishing Point, that is just kind of like that next tier of pen that you're just like bought and sold on it, and you save up for it, you get it, and then a lot of people do that, and then they just don't look back. You know, if you're buying from an authorized retailer, it has a return policy. Obviously, if you're like writing with it, you want to write with it for a while, you may have a restocking fee. We have one if you like ink it up and use it and stuff like that, because we got to clean it out and inspect it and all that, and it's just really just to kind of cover that. You know, but if you want to get a feel for it, if you're buying a $150 pen and there's a 10% restocking fee, that might be worth it to you to be guaranteed that you're going to love that specific pen that you get. So that's something to consider. But the ones that are pretty safe bets, I kind of already mentioned Lamy 2000, Pilot Vanishing Point, Pilot Falcon, maybe. That one, the nib, the softness of the nib, depending on how much you want that could be a little hit or miss for some folks, but still a wildly popular pen. Platinum 3070-76, very reliable pen. Pilot Custom 74. Some people on the broad nibs maybe don't love them quite as much, because, I don't know why. Honestly, with those specific pens. Some of the Pilot nibs, like the Custom 74, tends to have a slightly weaker upstroke. That's just the way that they kind of are. Some people that like wigs them out and they don't like that, but especially on the broad nibs. But that's kind of how they go. And then there's others that are maybe a little bit more of a gamble, but usually those 5 tend to be pretty solid, and we don't get a high return rate on those. We don't have a lot of people that are disappointed, and they tend to be some of the more popular pens. So if you're looking to go into that kind of 150-ish range, those are all kind of right in that vein. The Custom 74 and the 3776 are just slightly higher on that, but those are going to be good ones for you to consider. All right, I got an ink question from Marlene E on Facebook. I'm confused about Calli ink, C-A-L-L-I. ink. It's India ink, and some sites say it can be put in a fountain pen. I know you can't put India ink in fountain pens, but my new Lamy Joy is a calligraphy pen. Can I use it in there? No. So any retailer that's saying that is just flat out wrong. So I looked at this, Calli ink because I don't sell it because it's not a fountain pen ink. I'll get into that in a second. It is a little confusing. I got to address the Lamy Joy thing because the Lamy Joy has it. Schaefer has a pen called the calligraphy pen. It's like a student grade pen that they sell in like a lot of bookstores and stuff like that. Sometimes pens that have stub or italic nibs on them are called calligraphy pens. Really just calligraphy is kind of a buzzword that some people recognize as fancy looking writing. But when you're really kind of in the pen world, real calligraphy is not done, honestly, with fountain pens in the sense that calligraphy is done with a dip pen. And so dip pens use a different type of ink altogether. Like you mentioned, India ink. But the Calli ink that I was looking at, I don't know their whole extensive line, but I looked at the Calli brand, which is by Daler Rowney. And I looked at Daler Rowney's website, and what they had their Calli ink listed as was a acrylic pigmented calligraphy ink. That's what they called it, which is going to be too thick for fountain pens, and it's going to clog them. You definitely do not want to use it in a fountain pen. The Lamy Joy might be advertised by some as a calligraphy pen, but the term calligraphy there is really just, it's the stub and italic nib. It's almost like the way that I can think to describe it is kind of like how you have gasoline and you have diesel fuel. You have gasoline engines and diesel engines. They're both in vehicles. They're both used to propel the vehicles. The fuel comes from the gas station through a pump. Seems very similar, but if you put diesel fuel in your gasoline engine, it is not going to work right. And if you put gasoline in your diesel engine, it is not going to work right because they're fundamentally just chemically different liquids. It's very much the same kind of thing with calligraphy ink versus fountain pen ink. Fountain pen ink is going to be water-based, almost always with dye, very, very seldom with pigment, and even then it's only a handful and it's a different type of pigment. When you've got something like the Calli that's a acrylic pigmented, it's going to seem like latex paint running through your fountain pen. It's going to clog, it's not going to flow, it's not the same consistency. And if you think about a fountain pen, it's got this feed, it's got this capillary action mechanism inside of it that it has to flow through. And a dip pen, it's basically you're dipping the nib inside the ink, and the ink is like clinging on to the outside of the nib and then kind of like slowly falling down it as you're writing with it. So calligraphy ink is thicker. So if you're trying to put something that's too thick into this kind of delicate mechanism inside a fountain pen, it's going to clog it up, it's going to dry it up, it's going to make a huge mess, if not completely ruin your pen. So I actually looked at the MSDS sheet because Daler Rowney had it for the Calli ink, and it classifies their ink as acrylic paint. So it's fundamentally different than a water-based fountain pen ink, and you are not going to want to use it. The same thing kind of goes for like fountain pen ink on a calligraphy nib. If you take a dip nib and use it on in fountain pen ink, it's going to just like run off. It's going to be super watery. It's not going to cling on, so it's just not going to work the same. Not going to really cause any harm to the dip nib necessarily, but it's certainly not going to work well. So the terms calligraphy ink, India ink, China ink, lawyer's ink, all of these are either like an acrylic or a shellac-based ink that should not be used in any type of fountain pen, including the Lamy Joy. So fountain pen ink is water-based, and it's less viscous than the calligraphy ink. So bottom line, don't use the Calli in a fountain pen unless you're playing a cruel joke on a friend and you want to ruin their pen. All right, nothing against Calli. It's just, I hear the same thing from other brands too, that you get. A lot of times art stores will carry a lot of acrylic-based or shellac-based calligraphy inks, and a lot of people get confused about those. I'm trying to remember the other brand. There's another brand that's more popular that I hear about. Oh, and the name is failing me right now. I'll probably remember it like 5 minutes into the next question. But there's another one that I hear about a lot that is very commonly mixed up. But no, please stick only with fountain pen-based inks, and you'll be in good shape. All right, got a troubleshooting question. This is from rduatty, yeah, on Instagram. Sometimes my nib will write smooth and then scratchy, all in the same sentence. Why? Good question. Okay, so your fountain pen is made of 2 tines that come together, unless you have some other configuration, but usually it's 2 nib tines with the tipping that has to match together. Usually what happens if you have a fountain pen and you're writing with it and it's feeling scratchy sometimes, it's usually because those 2 tines that are coming together are not properly aligned. So when you're touching it down to the paper, it's going to feel smooth in one direction, and then when you go in the other direction, it's going to feel scratchy, because one of those tines is down a little bit further than the other, or maybe it's a little bit out of whack or something like that, and it's catching a little bit only when you go in certain directions. And there's probably a pattern to it. Maybe you can feel it. Maybe if you're like really intentional about it, you're like, oh yeah, it's always when I like hook around from like a right to left. That's when I'm feeling it. That's probably because your right tine is dropped a little bit and the edge is kind of just catching a little bit if you're pressing down and holding at a certain angle. There's a lot of different things that could happen. It could be the tine's misaligned. It could be you're rotating the pen in your hand. It could be there's some kind of bent or damaged stuff. It could be maybe when the nib was ground, maybe it wasn't smoothed out on the underside of that nib just a little bit, and there's just a little bit of a catch there. So when you press down with a little bit of writing pressure, it digs in just a tad, which you only do maybe when you're at the beginning of a page, not at the end of a page. So there could be a lot of like finer points here, but basically everything that's when a nib is properly tuned and smooth and stuff like that, it really shouldn't catch like that with normal writing, unless you're doing something just crazy with your writing. So that is probably something that's going on. It's probably just something that's a little bit off, and that there might be something going on. Usually it's a simple misalignment. And what you can do is you can grab a loop if you have one handy. We sell them almost for this exact reason. It's not that we like teach people how to do like hardcore nib, grinding and retipping and stuff like that. But you get a loop like this, or you can use a magnifying glass. Really any kind of magnifier that you have can work really well. And you grab your fountain pen. I'm going to grab this Opus 88 that I have right here. And you take your pen, you look at it kind of like you're going to, stab yourself in the eye, but don't do that. Hold the loop right up to your eye, and then kind of bring it into focus. Use your hands to kind of stabilize it there a little bit, and then you can look right at the tip, and I can see this one looks awesome. But you can look right at it, and you'll be looking right at the end of the tip. And if you look at it and the two are very much aligned with each other, it's going to look really nice like that. But if it looks like that, then one of them's out of alignment. And you can actually just take, and you can just, especially if it's a steel nib, you can just take your thumbnail and just kind of bend it up, the one that's low, bend it up a little bit, bend it a little bit past where it needs to go. Only do this on a pen that you feel comfortable with, obviously. And if you feel like you're going to screw anything up, like everything you're doing here is at your own risk. So make sure that you're not doing anything that's going to void a warranty and all that kind of stuff. But if it's out of alignment a little bit and you just want to try tweaking it a tad, if you completely ruin it, then the manufacturer is going to be like, you ganked this thing up. That's not cool. We'll fix it, but we're going to charge you. So just be aware that whatever you do, just be cautious. But you can bend it up a little bit and usually fix that with relative ease if that's what's going on with your nib. That's where a loop really helps. So you can look at it and you can see what's going on. You can be like, oh yeah, that right tine is a little bit low. If the right tine's low and I'm writing from right to left, that right tine is dragging a little bit. You push up on it a little bit, you check it again, you're like, oh, that looks much more aligned. And then you write on the paper and you're like, oh, that feels way better. That's oftentimes what'll fix it, probably 80% of the time. Now, sometimes if there's something a little bit crazier going on, you know, you can get a little bentness, a little damage. You know, somebody borrows your pen and they really mash the thing and it gets kind of mangled looking. That gets a little bit tougher because then you're into like nib repair, which I'm not going to get into here. But you know, you can do some of that stuff. If you know, like are super ambitious, and you can have it repaired if it's an important pen to you, or sometimes you can swap out the nib if it's like really that damaged. But if there is like damage in one area but not in another area, that could explain some of the inconsistency. But even some of that inconsistency, oftentimes what I see happening sometimes, if the nib is aligned, but it still feels a little bit scratchy in some directions. You know, I've done some nib grinding stuff. I've done some of that on my own, and I know when I'm grinding something, basically I grind it, but there's like kind of a sharp edge when you do a fresh grind. So one of the steps for doing nib work is you use, you know, a micro mesh or something thereabouts. And I'm trying to see what I have handy because I didn't grab really any supplies ahead of time. There we go. So I have like a micro mesh. This is a 12,000 grit. Feels kind of leathery. And when you do a fresh grind, and this may have happened from the factory, one of the steps is you just kind of lift up one of the tines a little bit, and you just take a little bit of, you know, whatever grit of paper you're accustomed to. This is the manufacturer. Everybody might have a different process. You just kind of take it and you just kind of like nick the inside a little bit. So what you're doing is the part of the tines that kind of touch together, that tip right there, you're just like rounding off a little bit of that inside edge on the underside. So what happens when you manufacture the nib, you have a slit that's cut. So there's this cutting wheel that comes and cuts that slit. And then you usually have some kind of rounding or shaping that's done on the tip. And then if that's it, if there's not any type of smoothing or polishing that's done in addition to that, there might be a little bit of just a tiny, tiny bit of a sharp edge right on the inside there. And it means at certain angles, or if there's any kind of misalignment, it could just dig just a tiny bit. And you can feel really, really small amounts of that. And so usually what happens, manufacturers will polish that inside edge so it doesn't catch as much. If there was any type of imperfection in the process, you could have, you know, a little bit of a catch right there. Typically, honestly, what you see more often is companies will over polish that inside edge, and that's what creates what's called baby's bottom, which can create flow issues. It feels really smooth, but if it's too rounded on the inside of that nib, you end up with too much of a gap here, and the ink actually has a hard time making it to the paper. That's an overcorrection done to that. But with what you're talking about here, feeling scratchy, sometimes that little inside edge could be an issue. So this is a little more advanced of a technique of doing it, but if you have something like a micro mesh and you feel like it's perfectly aligned, I know there's probably a little, just needs to be taken off that little edge a little bit. You can lift up a tine on one side and then kind of like take that micro mesh and just kind of smooth it out like 2 or 3 times, just very slight. Lift up the other tine, do the same thing the other direction, and then you can write, and that might be okay. Or if you're not comfortable lifting tines and doing all that kind of stuff, you can just try smoothing out a little bit on the micro mesh itself. You can just take it and do some kind of, rounding pattern. You kind of move it back and forth a little bit, kind of all around like this as you're going back and forth gently, and that can help do it. Now, obviously, when you're smoothing out nibs and doing all that kind of stuff, you're getting outside of where the manufacturer really wants you to be. So you might be voiding warranty at that point. So it would be kind of a last resort if you know you're past your return window or you're past your warranty period, or it's a pen that you're like, whatever, it's a $20 pen and I'm not going to go through all the trouble returning it and stuff like that. I'm just going to mess around and try fixing it myself. You can do that. And that's basically how you do it. So that could be it. Yeah, but just be careful, because if you round that edge too much, you can actually create baby's bottom, which would really not be ideal, because then the only solution is to basically intentionally kind of grind it away, which is much more involved, getting rid of baby's bottom. And I'm not going to get into that today because that's not the question that you asked. But to wrap all this up, any nib smoothing or adjustment, you got to do it at your own risk. Then of course, if this is on a brand new pen and it just is intolerable to you, you can always reach out to the retailer, or go directly through the manufacturer and do a warranty thing. If you're just like, I'm not going to go mess with my pen, that is very welcomed part of the process as well. But I've wanted to get deep into maybe why it might be happening, and if you wanted to try and fix it yourself, you could. But certainly, it's not the expectation that you should have to do that on a brand new pen. Okay. All right. Ooh, this is going to be a robust question, so this next one. So I'm going to take a sip of water. All right, this question is from Lucy Honeychurch on Twitter. How is the process with special editions, and is it hard for you to get them? Do you know how the companies decide to make special editions, and why is this very annoying thing with special editions that are only sold in specific countries? I can't buy the red Kaweco in Germany. Okay, I have some very robust notes on this one. I just really got on a roll, so if I seem to glance at my computer a lot, it's because I don't want to miss anything that I so thoughtfully typed out last night as I was preparing this. So yes, this is kind of a mysterious process, and one that I'm even discovering more all the time. There really isn't a special edition governing body or guideline out there, so it's all very much shaped by the marketplace, different manufacturers, or maybe their distributors, to a lesser degree retailers like me. It's mostly fueled by manufacturers who see an opportunity to make something kind of more special and more interesting than their standard kind of regularly offered product line. So it might be, okay, they know globally they've got to sell things that appeal to everybody, so they're going to stick with blacks and blues and things that are a little more conventional, but they might be like, hey, red pens typically aren't hot enough to be in global demand. I'm using your red Kaweco as an example, but we know that if we make fewer of them and make it a more limited thing, there will be some demand for it, so let's do that. So there's a couple of ways that this can take shape. You can have limited editions, like a true numbered limited edition, where there's like a theme that drives the idea, some artistic element, or maybe there's a licensed branding associated to it, Star Wars theme, or whatever it might be, like an actual like trademarked license thing. Could be very narrow, kind of niche, or it could be something where it's like just inspired by the designers inside the company, and they're only going to make 30 of them, that kind of thing, and it's super limited in that way. You can have other ones that are limited kind of by a certain amount of material that's available, maybe, and that's all that can really be produced of the pen. So it's maybe not the theming that's driving it, but there's sometimes, I'm thinking specifically like of a lot of Italian companies do this, where they'll kind of have a small supplier of celluloid or some other interesting material, and they'll get enough to make 100 pens or 400 pens or something like that. And so they'll make a run of one model of pen out of this special material because that's the only material they can get. So they'll make a special edition pen. It's not enough to ship globally, so they'll kind of make it in more limited quantities. There's another special edition which could be globally distributed but limited in nature by the amount of time it's produced, maybe based on the manufacturer's capacity, based on kind of just their general preference, or maybe the interest they feel there might be in a given color or material, or it's limited by a certain quantity maybe that they're capable of committing to. Oftentimes that's not disclosed. If it's not like a numbered limited edition, it's more of a special edition that they make in like a single batch kind of thing. Sometimes they don't say how many pens that's going to be. And that's their right to do so. So manufacturers might do this to help maybe fill downtime in their production if they want to keep their staff busy all the time. But there's historically low times in the year. They may make a special edition kind of during those slower times and then release it later on to try to ride out the waves of seasonality in their manufacturing process. It could be to experiment with some maybe interesting materials or designs that might be a little more risky, or to help kind of just keep the brand interesting or relevant when there's maybe a lull in new product development. They might come out with a special edition just to kind of stay top of mind kind of in the marketplace. Or like specific regions or retailers may approach the manufacturer and commit to a quantity of a special edition in exchange for some kind of exclusivity. And that could be to, just help, the distributor, for example, may have multiple different brands that they bring in. It might not be, there's the the manufacturers who might ship globally, and they may have different regions where there's a distributor for various reasons. I'll get into that in just a second. But sometimes those regional distributors, there just may not be a lot going on with their brand, so they may approach, have an opportunity and just to generate interest in their given area. So often, for a given local market, which is what you're seeing a lot in the fountain pen world, I'm talking like a geographically local market. It's very geographically driven. Given that most of the fountain pen world, or most of the world in general, I think is still primarily brick and mortar centric. That's definitely true in the fountain pen world. Really not so much in the US. We're very different in the US than a lot of other countries. And I know US, Australia, Canada probably are a little bit different. A lot of other countries, especially in Europe, Japan, they're much more brick and mortar centric. So that gets really interesting when you have manufacturers who are primarily in like a brick and mortar centric area, and then you're dealing with other regions where it's primarily online. There gets to be some challenges there in terms of understanding. So a lot of global companies will have distribution channels that are established in key kind of geographic regions, mostly because the laws, currencies, logistics of the distribution, different demands of the market, like customer preferences and stuff, can be very different in different parts in the world. And that can all shape what kind of interest there is in certain products. And that can be just a lot for a single manufacturer in one little town who's producing all these products. That can be a lot for them to wrap their head around. So they have distribution relationships set up, because there's nothing like having somebody that grew up in that given area, understands that market really well. It's like how many huge American companies have tried to establish presences in China, for example, and have failed miserably because they just don't understand the culture at all, and there's laws and there's stuff around that. So having local presences can sometimes make a huge difference in a brand's success there. So in order for a certain special run of a given product to be made by a manufacturer, a more local distributor may place an order for a certain guaranteed size in order to get the commitment from the manufacturer to actually make it. Because the manufacturer's got to make a commitment, and they have certain efficiencies and economies of scale of making production runs of given things. And so they have kind of minimum order quantities that they may need to do to make a production run of a given pen. And so when a distributor may be talking to a manufacturer, they might say, hey, we want to do this red Kaweco or whatever. And so Kaweco may say, okay, but you have to get X number of pens for us to even be able to consider it. Otherwise, it's impractical and we can't do it profitably. And that's got to work out. So that might be happening. So the distributor may go, okay, I'll commit to a certain number, but you need to allow us to have an exclusivity on it. That way we can be guaranteed to sell, that number, which might be higher than we probably would sell of a given normal product. But because we have exclusivity, the demand for it could be higher. So that's kind of the way it ends up working out sometimes. So, the distributor is making more of an investment on this kind of new product that's being created. The manufacturer is able to cover their costs and maintain their health and profitability, and the marketplace is getting something that may not have existed otherwise because it might be more narrow, more niche, or more focused on their local region and the demands that are there. So it's kind of a win for everybody, with the exception of those who are outside of that region, like you, looking to get that pen, that red pen that's not available in Germany. It kind of ends up being a bummer for you. The willingness and the capacity for a manufacturer to do this is going to vary wildly based on their size, their capacity, the interest based on their own kind of strategic objectives, and really kind of their own kind of philosophy about how much they want to do that stuff. Certain brands you see, like, it's much more in their culture to be creative and just come out with, limited and special editions all the time. Other ones, it's like a huge deal for one pen a year or every couple of years to tweak the color and come out with the exact same model, and that's like a huge deal. So it really depends on a lot of different factors, and there's no kind of one set way to do it. Many companies will kind of mix and match these processes based on their own decisions. Like they might have, certain areas of the world where they really don't experiment very much, but then more in their local area, they do a lot more of that kind of stuff. I'm thinking like Pilot and Sailor, they have a lot of unique stuff in Japan, but then they really don't have that much out of Japan. And so everybody on the outside looking in is kind of like, man, they have all this crazy cool stuff that's available there, but why can't we get any of it here? That kind of thing. Lamy does regional variations for some of their pens, but you look at a brand like maybe Visconti or Stipula, they might come out with a lot more smaller batch, more limited things, maybe more country-specific exclusives around the world. It really just depends on what the company's trying to do. So Kaweco, as you mentioned, may have committed to do a certain region for a pen, either for a time or altogether, so it's not really available everywhere. And this can definitely appear frustrating outside to the online pen community, and I totally get that because, believe me, we hear about it. Basically everything new that comes out, and we get asked about it here. And a lot of times, we know now from having years of experience doing this kind of thing of when there is kind of a exclusive relationship thing set up, and we know that there's only so much banging on the door that is going to make any kind of a difference, because if there's kind of an exclusivity thing, it's like that's pretty sacred, and companies are pretty honorable, and they'll honor that. And likewise, when we look to come out with something exclusive, we commit to a certain quantity, which is usually much higher than our normal things that we might buy, and then that in exchange for that exclusivity kind of thing. So, here in the online pen community, we see something that piques our interest. We may see it from a particular Instagrammer, blogger, YouTuber, whatever, and we just see it and we want it, and we don't really think about all the logistics behind what it takes to globally distribute said thing, because we kind of want what we want when we want it, and it's not always so obvious maybe why something's only available from certain regions. But I can say, having been involved in many conversations around exclusive products and stuff like that, there's definitely an element of risk when it comes to developing these exclusives. That's some of the more interesting aspects of this work, and kind of the behind the scenes thing that we get to do is we have to assess what kind of demand there might be for certain things. We have to kind of leverage, the relationships we might have with our manufacturers or distributors. We have to kind of take some leaps to maybe consider something that doesn't yet exist in the marketplace, but we think there could be. And we may have to pony up like quite a commitment of something in order to kind of get that exclusivity on it. As a retailer or distributors do the same thing. And so there's kind of a bit of a gamble every time in order to do that. And there's more uncertainty and risk, kind of excitement in that process than for just regularly offered products. So certain regions may offer more exclusives, simply because their risk tolerance is higher. Here in the US, we tend to like to do a lot of limited things because, we have we have a very consumer culture here, that helps, and very, very strong online presence here, but also because our risk tolerance is pretty high. And so we usually are willing to kind of dive in and do it. But it really is a pretty nerve-wracking process to commit to large quantities of special or exclusive products. And I 100% empathize with the kind of annoyance aspect of it, of seeing things you really want and then not having them available to you. And no matter where you are in the world, you're seeing that happen somewhere in the pen world. But to kind of talk about the flip side of it, without the sort of exclusivity and kind of special edition kind of element of it, you wouldn't see nearly as much exciting stuff happening in the pen world, really. So a lot of brands would be much more conservative if they had to have a more guaranteed global commitment of every single product that came out. And sometimes there can be special editions and special runs of things that are so popular that they become regular editions and become more widely available. I know we've seen that with Lamy sometimes. They've done a special edition color that then joins on to be a more regular edition color. More recently, we've had the All-Star Pacific, was a special edition for several years ago, and now it's a regular edition. That was the same way with the All-Star Black. It was the same way with the All-Star Purple years ago. So you'll see sometimes that they'll put something out, maybe it's a little more speculative, it turns out it's very well received, and then they join it to the regular line. So, it's really good ultimately for the pen community, but yeah, the FOMO gets real, and it does get frustrating when you can't get something very easily in your area. So the best thing that you can do if you are looking at things and it's not available in your area, You know, you can, of course, just pony up and pay for it and get it shipped from overseas or whatever it is that you can get it. Or you can kind of beg and plead your local retailers or maybe your local manufacturers to get them to offer it where you are. And you know, they, whoever is in the business, so to speak, if we get asked continually for something, you know, if there's something that's available in another region and we get asked about it constantly, then we know there's demand for it, and we are more inclined to try to ask for it, or maybe see if we can negotiate something. Maybe sometimes in a region it'll be available for a certain period of time, and then it'll open up globally, or they'll be exclusive for, you know, 90 or 180 days, and then it'll open up, and then the exclusivity can be taken on by another region. You know, that can happen sometimes. So it really depends, you know, from one manufacturer to another. But basically, by you speaking up, having a voice, and doing it constructively, of course, you can, you know, piss and moan all over the social media if you really want to, but that's not necessarily as helpful and constructive all the time. The best thing is if you have like a retailer or a local kind of place that you, local meaning, you know, whatever your country really, you know, asking, hey, is this going to be available in the US, in Germany, in Australia, in Kenya, wherever you might be, you know, asking your local retailer so that they know that you really want that thing. And if enough people do that, then the retailer can say, okay, gosh, there really is demand for this thing. I should probably look into this, and they can have awareness of that. That is the magic, and that's how it really works best. Cool. All right, I got a couple of personal questions here. Personal, but also entirely pen related. This is from 111 on Twitter. What's your current everyday carry, and what nibs do you have on them, and what are they currently inked with? Much love from Indonesia and Australia. Very cool. This is pretty easy because I can just pretty much pull out my pen case and show you what I've got. So my everyday stuff that I have right now, I have 2 pens that I'm carrying in my pocket. I answer this kind of question from time to time. And largely the ones I've been carrying in my pocket haven't really changed much recently, but the ones I have in my case have. So I thought it was pertinent to take this question. So the 2 pens that I'm kind of daily carrying right now, I have a Traveler's brass pen, which kind of took me by surprise. I kind of just was playing with it initially, and it was so small and cute and tinkery. And I was like, this is pretty durable. Let me just throw it in my pocket and carry it around a little bit and see. And I really haven't stopped carrying it around since it came out months ago. So I have this brass pen. It only comes in a fine nib, so that's what I have on it. Very reliable pen too, by the way. And it's a cartridge-only pen, which is really not even my preference, but it is what it is for this pen. So I'm actually refilling an ink cartridge with Noodler's Black, which is not normally available in cartridges. But you know, it doesn't use gobs of ink, and I carry it around, and it's super reliable, and you know, it's permanent, so I like to have a permanent ink option. It doesn't leak, it doesn't, you know, it does a really great job, even though I like mow the lawn with it and everything. I just really beat this thing up a lot. But super durable, so I keep that in my pocket. The other one that I've been carrying around for going on 3 years now almost is my Homo sapiens Bronze Age, full-size one, and I have it with a fine nib. This one is a good carry-on pen. I do get a little bit of ink that gets on the nib from time to time. I have to wipe it off. It's not super big deal. I just kind of wipe it on the corner of a towel or something whenever I think of it. So this one, I'll get a little bit of ink in the cap if I'm like, because it's hot outside, I come inside, this pen gets put through a lot of abuse. But all things considered, it's a very, very durable pen. You know, this material is you know, volcanic rock and resin, so it's very, very tough. And I like the way it writes. I have a fine nib on it, and I have Robert Oster Blue Water Ice in there right now. Nice blue with a kind of a red sheen. Sheens on a lot of different papers. Very easy sheener, so I like that one a lot. Very hassle-free ink as well, so I like that one. So those are pretty much my standbys and what I'm carrying around on a pretty regular basis. The Blue Water Ice, I had it in there for a while, and then I switched to Fire and Ice, and then I went back to Blue Water and Ice, and I'm just kind of doing that. So I found that I'm kind of more or less sticking to the same inks in these pens, and then the ones that I carry around with me, I'll change up the inks a lot more. So I'm currently carrying a variety of other pens here. So I have a Visconti 12 case that fits very nicely into my backpack, which is why I use that. I have like a tablet sleeve in my backpack. I guess it's made for like if you have like an iPad mini or something like that. And I find that this just fits really nicely right in there. So that's just kind of where I've gravitated to of doing that. So in that case, I'll show you what I have. I kind of a variety of things. So I have a Visconti Opera Master Luna, which is an exclusive that we have here. I've been carrying this pen around ever since we first got it. I've actually never inked it up, this specific pen. And not because I don't want to, but because I just love the way that it looks. I have a couple different Opera Masters, so I know exactly how it writes, but I love the way this one looks, and I love to show off the material, which is usually what is the most captivating thing about this pen. So, I'll take it to pen shows, or I'll show it to, people that I see locally. It's always a crowd pleaser. I've got a medium nib on that, and again, it's uninked. This is a Laban. This is a newer pen. I got this at the DC Pen Show. Laban is a brand that we don't currently sell. It's one that I'm interested in, so I could use a little bit of feedback if you're curious about them. So they're made in Taiwan, but they have so many different models. Oh my gosh, it's overwhelming. So it's almost hard to like even narrow it down and pick. But this is one that kind of caught my eye, so I got it at the show. It's an abalone shell. Very gorgeous, kind of bright pen. That shell is just incredible. It's like covering the whole pen. And I want to say this one is an MSRP of like $240, which is really pretty reasonable. Steel nib, but really reasonable for the amount of shell that's in this pen. This specific one has a medium nib, and I do not have it currently inked. I just like to look at it. It's pretty. I'm carrying a lot of pretty pens right now, quite honestly. This is a Wall Eversharp Deco Band, which I got at the DC Pen Show as well. And I have it inked up. Right now it has a fine Superflex nib on it. And it is inked up with Monteverde DC Super Show Blue, which we just got some in, but this is my bottle that I got from the show. And that's what I have it inked with right now, because I inked it up at the show, and it's been inked up ever since, and I'm a fan. This pen I'm carrying around, this is called Siyahi. So this is an Indian brand that comes out of India. And they were there, the founder was there, Sine, from India at the DC Pen Show, and again in San Francisco. And so I picked this up from Sine in DC, and this model is called the Imperator, and it's a wood pen. And so I'm like kind of a sucker for wood pens, even though we don't really have a lot of them in our store. We have a couple of Faber-Castells, but not really a lot of wood because it's a kind of a hard material to make pen out of. But the fit and finish is really tight. This pen, the cool thing about this specific one, is made of wengi, which is a type of rosewood. And I actually have one of my own pens that is made out of wengi. And this pen to me is very significant because this was the pen that I showed to the first corporate customer that I ever had back in the earliest days of the Goulet Pen Company back in 2007. And it's a rollerball because I wasn't yet enlightened to fountain pens back then. But this is the specific pen that was the one that kind of showed the potential to that corporate client that I could make wood pens. And that sold that first corporate order that really got Goulet pens off the ground. Not profitable, but off the ground. That was our first corporate order. So to me, I was just like, oh, okay, I'm kind of a sucker. So I was like, let me get the pen in wengi just because of what it means. Still kind of a cool looking wood, but very, very textured, very kind of rough feeling. The wood itself naturally is kind of pitted and stuff like that. So I don't know, they have a couple different woods, they have a couple different pen models, so I'm interested in that. They even have some flex nibs, which are interesting. So I'm talking with them right now. So a lot of the pens you see are like, newer things, speculative things, especially coming off a couple pen shows like this. I'm talking to some of the speculative brands, so you're kind of getting a little bit of a first look of like, how about that? What is Brian carrying around here? Let's see. Another pen that I have here, this is the Montegrappa Elmo, the Rosso Cilegia. And this is an exclusive that we still have a couple of, I think, but we're on the tail end of them. So this is the first one that is coming out here. There may be more. And solid pen, love it. And this one is a medium nib, and I don't currently have it inked. Some of these pens, like, I may or may not carry it inked because it's like, they're using Jowo steel nibs. I know UO steel nibs. You know, I've tested the samples of it, so I don't have this one currently inked. I will sometimes carry around pens for my own needs of like showing the pens and stuff like that, doing this kind of thing, where I don't necessarily need to have it inked up. I just show the material and the feel of the pen, so I'll have that. I also have a Diplomat Arrow. This is the orange one. I have a medium nib on it, and this is inked up with Diamine Syrah, which I do love that ink. And then I have, this is another Laban. This is a fancier Laban. This is a Urushi. The material is called the Summit. Gorgeous color and material. Little pricier pen. This is $1,000 MSRP. But again, I saw it at the show and I was like, let me see what's up with some of the Urushi that Laban has going on. Ebonite pen body, gold nib, you know, very solid pen. It's an 18 karat medium nib that I currently have inked up with Jerbon Corline d'Egypte. So it's a nice like shimmery orange ink, which I thought would match the pen pretty nicely. Could have gone orange, could have gone, you know, red, brown, a lot of different options with this ink, with this pen, but really gorgeous pen that I'm enjoying carrying around and showing off a little bit. Again, the Laban is something I've got on my radar, so if you're interested, let me know. Another pen that I have here is the Pelikan M800 Ocean Swirl, M805 Ocean Swirl, excuse me. And I have a fine nib on this one, and I have this, what do I have this inked up with? I believe it's Diamine Marine. I haven't actually used this one in a minute. Yeah, Diamine Marine matches the pen really well. You know, and it's, I'll just kind of take that one, put it in my rotation every now and then, take it out, and so that's in there. And then what else do I have? Okay, that's empty at the moment. Yeah, so that's kind of it. That's what I'm daily carrying right now. I know it's a lot of pens. Sometimes I'll actually have, you know, a case like this that I'll also carry. I've got a couple like Opus 88, a Pelikan, another Siahi that's a different model called the Crown. This one's kind of cool, actually. I'll show you. So while I have it here, and I've kind of already gotten you aware of that. So this is a different, this is a rosewood with kind of like a brass finish on the trim, which I actually really dig. And it's got a tiger's eye in the top. So really kind of cool natural gem in the top. And then, you know, got kind of a cool finish there. And this one's got a gold nib on it. So, and I don't have this one inked at the moment. So, you know, I'll have interesting things like that I'm carrying around. I always get in kind of a weird place if I'm like kind of carrying speculative things around. We're not really selling them yet, so we might get some questions. You all might ask in Q&A, but then you'll call and ask my team, and they'll be like, what the heck is Brian talking about? You know, because it's hard to keep 40 people in our company informed about whatever random pen I might be carrying around, and we're talking about in video. So maybe keep it in the comments here. Hit me up on, DM me on Instagram or something if you're like, hey, I saw that Crown pen. That seemed pretty interesting. You know, let me know. But that's what I'm carrying at the moment. Oh, and then one other thing that I wanted to point out to you, another fun pen that I've got on my radar. So I'm using a Franklin Christoph. So Franklin Christoph I've had on my radar for years. You know, they've done like some retailer exclusives and stuff like that, but they largely just sell through themselves through their own channel. So I saw them at both DC and the San Francisco show, got to spend some time with Scott Franklin and just got to get to know the brand, the people behind the brand, just a little bit more than I had before. So that was kind of cool to do that in 2018. And so I picked up one of their pens because I didn't have a Franklin Christoph. Rachel has them, Drew has them. I didn't have one, so I was like, let me go ahead and get one. So I got like their what is it called, antique glass finish, if you're curious about that. And I got the Pocket 65, I think is what this one is. So that's what this is, the antique glass. And the nib that I have on here is really cool. This is really why I wanted to show it to you. So they use UO nib units and stuff, so that's pretty cool. But the nib that I have, this is Regalia Writing Labs, Ralph Reyes. So he's grinding this cool stuff. It's basically kind of emulating a Sailor King Eagle nib. So he calls this his trilogy. So it's actually 3 nibs that are welded on top of each other and cut into kind of this like big, almost like an architect grind kind of thing, and it allows you to get this kind of huge like paintbrush kind of effect. I've been using it to sign my handwritten thank you notes, just to like write on. And let me try and get you one with a really good variation here that I have written. Depending on how fast I write, I can get this kind of like broken, kind of like almost paintbrush type effect. Let me see if I can find a really good one. And it's got a really wet ink flow, so I can really dump it on. And I'm using Jeroboam Emerald of Chivor in it right now. So, you know, if I write really fast, I can get kind of a break in it like I have in that W. Very kind of like raw, scripty kind of thing. And I'm just really having fun with that, specifically for this kind of thing where it's like I want to show off a sparkly ink. I want to, you know, and so I'm just kind of writing a bunch. I'm trying to write, you know, like 5 or 10 of these a day. And so I'll just kind of like stockpile them up a little bit. And so, yeah, that's what I'm using that pen for at the moment. It goes through some ink. It's really cool. So Ralph's nibs are not very cheap, but he's doing some really cool and interesting things with nib grinds and stuff like that, and I can really appreciate that. So that's what I've been messing around with. That it's not really a daily carry because I'm leaving it at my desk, but I am writing with it almost on a daily basis. So that's kind of some of the stuff that I'm up to. Next question, this is from Dylan Adkins 529 on Instagram. Hey Brian, just wondering what your favorite part about your job is. Favorite part about my job. I feel like I've touched on this a little bit recently, or maybe some of the most meaningful parts or whatever. So I won't go super deep detail on this, but there's a lot of things that I love about my job. Honestly, it's hard to say just kind of one favorite thing. There's a lot of very tactical, kind of tangible things that I really love about what I do. It's like the pens themselves. Of course, I completely geek out on the pens. Getting to do content creation, video stuff, you know, expressing myself creatively or whatever is really cool. New product selection, kind of the relationship building and getting to work on exclusives and branded stuff is kind of cool. The leadership aspect of things and, you know, managing my team and getting to kind of do organizational health and structure and all that kind of stuff is really cool. There's a lot of that very almost kind of tactical stuff that I really love. But if I want to kind of like take it up a little bit more into the stratosphere, get a little more ethereal on you here, I'd have to say that kind of my favorite thing about my job is really just kind of the sense of purpose and calling that I have to be doing the work that I'm doing. You know, that's something that I think most people, especially millennials, which I'm on like the front end of the millennial generation here, I think that's something that is very desired, is to like have that sense of like being a part of something greater than yourself. And I definitely get a sense of that being involved in what I'm doing here, not just with like Goulet pens, but what Goulet pens means to the fountain pen community as a whole. Really get a strong sense that like the work that I am putting into it is helping to mean something much greater than just me, which is really, really kind of cool. You know, not to say that I do it all well, because I screw up a lot and I have to work on myself constantly and kind of live up to that. But it's kind of that process of doing the work is what I do. And so I feel like I'm kind of uniquely suited to that. And then the pen community itself is just incredible. I'm very passion oriented, which I connect with very much. And then especially having gone at like 2 pen shows recently, you know, getting to see people in person, hear some of the stories of why people are into pens and what their pen and writing kind of lifestyle means to them in their life. Man, it just really validates that these are my people, you know, that the work that I'm doing really is making a difference in some people's lives, if only in a small way, you know, that I'm really made for this, and I'm just motivated to do it as much as possible, and I just absolutely love it. You know, I was up way too late last night working, wasn't even trying, just kind of lost track of time, just because I love it so much and I feel such purpose from it. So that would probably be the favorite part about the job, is that sense of purpose. And to close it out for you this week, this is from Alan S. on Facebook. Why don't you ever pick my questions? Well, Alan, sometimes I do. Sometimes I do. No, seriously though, every week we're getting so many questions, you know, probably 10 times or more than what I could possibly answer. So sometimes it's just playing the odds. You know, I can't answer everything. I'm not intentionally trying to avoid anybody, I can say that. So just keep on asking. I'll do my best. You know, it's not personal if I don't answer. It's not personal if I do answer a lot of times too. So it's honestly just a matter of kind of what I feel in the moment, and just kind of keep at it. My team will try and help out if they can. But You lucked out on this one, Alan. I saw that question and I was just like, why not? Question of the week question for this week is, what pen has caused you to make the leap from like that maybe $50 to $150 range, or just caused you to like just get a pen that was just in another league that you have not had before? Or if you haven't done that yet, what pen is enticing you to do so if you are feeling inclined in that way? I'm just kind of curious to hear what is drawing you into that. And then a writing prompt for you. This is actually pull out your pen and write with, for your own sake and enjoyment, write about what your dream job is. Maybe you're living it out now, in which case you can write about what you're doing, or write about what you would love to do maybe one day. That'd be kind of cool. So that's all I got for you this week. I hope you've enjoyed Q&A. You can learn about some of the things that I talked about here on gouletpens.com. Pick them up for yourself. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe. Please subscribe if you haven't already. It helps us out a lot, and you get notified when we put out new cool stuff. We got lots of video stuff in the works, so it's going to be fun. Andy's working hard trying to make some cool stuff happen. So I hope you've enjoyed this Q&A. Have a great weekend, a great rest of your week, and right on.